So this man went to the doctor because he had pain, he had cramping, he had bleeding in his stools, he could not work anymore, he sometimes did not make the toilet, his body was screaming at him. So when he sat in front of me, consulting with me, in a retreat that I was running in the US, I began to investigate. I said to him, tell me, do you remember, you would not remember, but do you know what you were fed as a child? Yes, he said, my mother got mastitis and so I was put on the bottle. Well, what was the milk? It was a cow's milk. Aha. Were there any responses or reactions to that? She said, my mother said I got eczema. And when I got eczema, he said, my mother took me to the doctor who gave a cream, and this cream settled it down, but then it would raise up again. Aha. So can you see thread number one? This child had an allergy to the cow's milk. The mother didn't know what to do. So she went to the doctor, who put the baby on a drug. Now that drug is interfering with the development of this little baby's adrenal glands, the development of the kidneys, the liver. It's also quite damaging to the gastrointestinal tract. When it got really bad, his diarrhea that started to develop at the age of 2, he would be put on antibiotics sometimes. One doctor, he likened the antibiotics to dropping an atomic bomb on the human body. I'm not against antibiotics. They've saved lives for thousands of years and they will continue, but I believe they should only be kept for a life-saving event, when the life is challenged. Yes, it can save a life, but what we should be doing is nipping it in the bud. What's the old saying? A stitch in time saves 9. Start early. That's why listen to the body. If there's discomfort, do something. I have a story to illustrate that. A lady is taking her little grandson for a walk. They're walking for a couple of kilometres. They're going to visit a friend. She did not know that the little boy had a stone in his shoe. He said, my foot's sore. He's only little. He's 5. He doesn't know what's causing. And she said, shh, you'll be right, we'll be there soon, So the little boy keeps going, starts to limp a little bit. You'll be right, we're nearly there. The little boy keeps walking because he has no choice. The grandmother's hurrying him along. By the time they get to the friend's house, the little boy can't walk on his foot anymore. The grandmother has to carry him. She's very busy, she's got a lot to do. The little one's crying a little bit. He seems to have a little bit of a fever developing, and her friend says, give him a Panadol. A Panadol will get that temperature down. It's a drug, said to be a gentle drug. He's crying and then he eventually falls asleep. When he wakes up, she notices that his foot is swollen. When he slept, he'd taken his shoe off and just had the sock on. She notices a little bit of blood on the bottom of the sock. She takes the sock off. His foot is quite swollen and there's a wound at the bottom of the foot. He wakes up crying. She looks at her friend. She said, we must take him to the hospital. They take him to the hospital and the doctor discovers there's a little stone embedded into the bottom of the little boy's foot. So the little boy is given high-dose antibiotics. He is given more drugs to try and get that temperature down. The doctor realises they will have to do surgery to get that little stone out. Now, it could all have been prevented if the grandmother had stopped and investigated why the little boy had a sore foot. He had a stone in his shoe. Often it is that simple. We've got to listen. As soon as the body makes a noise, we must listen. So let's go back to the history of Tom. Number 1, dairy intolerance at a young age. Number 2, regular drugs, antibiotics. He was also vaccinated. Vaccination is known also to have a fairly damaging effect on the gut flora. Let's have a look. He's developing along. The mother notices that he goes to the bathroom quite a lot. In fact, she notices that he has diarrhea quite a bit. 5, 6, 7 years of age, often his little underpants are soiled. But the little boy's embarrassed to tell his mother, so he puts up with it. He puts up with it for quite a long time. Let's fast forward to when the boy is 15. He's actually getting embarrassed now because sometimes he doesn't quite make the toilet, and of course that's a bad smell around his friends. So the mother finally takes him to the doctor. He's about 16 now, and he's diagnosed with irritable bowel disease. He's put on some drugs to calm that down. So can you see the cycle that's happening here? The drugs, the irritation in his gut that never is seriously addressed. He continues to have cheeses and creams and butters that are irritating the lining. So when he came to me, this condition was very well established. He now had been told he had an autoimmune disease. His body was starting to attack itself. So I began to look at what we could do right now. I know that the body's designed to heal itself. I also know that there are some foods that act like kerosene to a fire on the gut. Refined sugar, and this man loved his sweets. He said he could remember from a very young age he would eat a lot of sugar. The other is dairy. It is true, in the Scandinavian mountains there are some organic dairy farms and the family eat dairy and they do well on it. It's because it's in their heritage. I'm a 5th generation Australian Scottish descent. I've never been able to handle milk. The majority of people can't. In fact, the figures I saw in one study that was reported in the newspaper that 60% of Australians can't handle dairy. When you think about it, we are the only creature that drinks another creature's milk. We are the only creature that has milk past baby. People say to me, "What milk do you drink, Barbara?" My answer is, I'm weaned. I eat food. Milk is for babies. And if a baby can't have breast milk, then the best milk would be from a healthy goat. You look at the size of a human baby and the size of a baby goat. They're very similar, whereas cow's milk is very thick milk, it's very concentrated milk. It's not the best for baby guts. Let's go back to the Scandinavian dairy farm. Often they would make their milk into feta cheeses, into yogurts. Those forms of dairy are almost pre-digested, so they are easier on the gut. Let's go back to Tom. We're having a look at what irritates the gut. Unbeknownst to Tom, the foods he was eating was irritating. Remember what I said earlier? It's almost as if no matter what he ate, it just went through him. So he thought, what the heck, I'll eat what I want. So the refined sugar, the dairy, and also wheat. Wheat was hybridized in the 1950s. There are some excellent books that give the story of this. Probably the most famous is Dr. William Davis's book, Wheat Belly, where he gives the history. He shows how the wheat was hybridized in about the 50s. Dr. Norman Bourlag got a Nobel Prize in, I think, 1970 for this hybridized wheat. They wanted to produce a plant with a high yield of grain. This high yield of grain was to help with the starvation crisis, and no one complains about wanting to help the starvation crisis in Africa, India, Mexico. But no safety studies were ever done. It was actually pushed through quite quickly to help with the starvation crisis. What was never addressed was the effect on the human body. And in the hybridization of the wheat, creating a plant that only grows about 2 foot tall, has a thick stem, has a very heavy yield of grain, that grain now contains a protein or a gluten structure that is incredibly complex, very difficult for the human gut to break down. Now, if a person were to eat it sometimes, eat it as a sourdough bread, and the sourdough, or the culturing process of that culture in the sourdough bread, it breaks down the protein or the gluten in the grain, makes it easier to digest. But you look at many people today, we have many people come by our health retreats. And many people, especially vegetarians, they're having cereal and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for tea, cakes, biscuits, donuts between. It's almost 100% wheat diet. So there's an overload of wheat, but also the change of the wheat. So wheat that did not cause problem in the 50s, 60s is causing problems today. You see, this wheat went worldwide in the late 70s. By the 1990s, in most industrialised nations, every pasta, every bread, every cake, every donut, cereal, it's all made out of this hybridised wheat. So this wheat was very irritating to Tom's gut. He was eating a lot of pasta, a lot of bread, a lot of donuts, a lot of cakes, a lot of fast food. He's a bachelor, so he just goes for the fast food. Once this is stopped, it can take a couple of months for the body to respond. It's like a splinter. Well, let's go back to the little boy's stone in the bottom of his foot. The stone was taken away. The offending article was removed, but it took a long time for that foot to heal because of the damage that had been done. Same with wheat. You can stop wheat, but be patient. The full effect may not be seen for a while. This brings me to another point, patience. Waiting for the body to heal itself. In Galatians 6 verse 9 it says, "Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we faint not." You've got to give it a little bit of time. And also it's in the book Hebrews 10:35, it says, "Cast not away therefore thy confidence, in the which is great recompense of reward, for ye have need of patience, in that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise." Notice the starting words of that. Cast not away therefore thy confidence. I have great confidence in this body that has been designed to heal itself. I have great confidence in the great God of heaven, who has proved himself again and again that he has created an amazing body and also given us many things to help heal, which we're going to have a look at as we look at Tom's story. Cast not away therefore thy confidence, in the which is great recompense of reward. For ye have need of patience, in that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise. So there's a little bit of time frame here. So Tom came to our retreat. We don't serve any refined sugar, we don't serve any dairy, we don't serve any wheat at our retreats. We have no peanuts. Peanuts are commonly known to contain mould. We also find that about 30% of our guests cannot handle oats. So also oats are out. Now if you love oats and they sit well with you, eat oats. But if you have a condition that requires healing, you might need to eliminate it for a while. Not forever, just until the body heals. In Psalm 104 verse 14, the Bible states that God gave herbs for the service of man. I love that verse because that verse defines the herbs for the service of man. When you put a herb into your body, the herb says to your body, "Where would you like me? Where would you like me to go?" But what's interesting, in every herb, God puts specific actives for different parts of the body. And there are a few herbs that directly coat, soothe and heal the lining of the gastrointestinal tract. One is aloe vera. When you open an aloe vera leaf, it's very slimy, isn't it? It's just like the lining of our gastrointestinal tract. It's a little slimy. So aloe vera can coat, soothe and heal the lining of the gut. And there is another herb called slippery elm. Slippery elm is the powdered bark of the slippery elm tree. And when you put water with slippery elm, it goes a little, you might say slimy. It's called slippery elm. I guess that's a nicer sounding word, is to say slippery. It goes a little thick. Both aloe vera and slippery elm contains growth stimulants, stimulating rapid healing in the lining of the gut. The cells that line the gastrointestinal tract are remade every 3 to 5 days. And so the gut is probably one area where you can get responses quite quickly, as you will see as I relate Tom's story. The slippery elm coats, soothes and heals the lining of the gastrointestinal tract. It also can give a little bit of firmness to the stools. Because Tom's situation was quite chronic, I added a couple of more herbs to that. So this is the mix we did. 80% slippery elm, 10% myrrh. Now myrrh is that gum resin, and it was given to baby Jesus. Remember the wise men bought the myrrh, the frankincense and the gold? Gold's expensive. Frankincense, very expensive. Tiny little bottle of frankincense essential oil cost about $70. Myrrh is also a very valuable herb. Myrrh is able to contribute to the healing, especially in the gut. The other herb is golden seal. Golden seal is given a nickname, king of tonics to all mucous membranes. And the gut is lined with mucous membranes. So it's a tonic to the mucous membrane. But something else very interesting about golden seal, it's one of my favourite herbs. Golden seal is anti-staphylococcic, it's anti-streptococcic, it's antibiotic, it's antifungal, it's antibacterial. Powerful herb. It's a very expensive herb. At one stage when it was hard to buy, we were paying $800 a kilo. I think it's a little less at the moment. We see it as gold. It looks like gold. It is almost fluorescent yellow when it is ground up. So let's go back to this mix. 80% slippery elm, 10% myrrh, which has been ground to a powder, and 10% golden seal, which has also been ground to a powder. So this is mixed in a jar, and warm water, warm to hot water, is poured on, say, a spoonful, maybe half a cup, and then it's mixed very quickly and then drunk. The more it sits, the thicker it gets. So with Tom, we gave him slippery elm, the slippery elm mix. We call it gut repair. We gave him that mix 4 times a day. We gave it to him at about 8 o'clock, we gave it again about the middle of the day, we gave it about 6 o'clock, and we gave it again just before he went to bed. So while he's sleeping, it's coating, soothing and healing the lining of his gut. When he came to us, he was on 20 milligrams of cortisone a day. He'd been on that for a few months. He was on anti-inflammatories. He said, what will I do with my medication? I said, I don't want you to touch your medication at the moment. We're going to implement a few changes and we're going to watch to see what the body does with this. When he came to us, he was having 8 bowel movements a day. He said before he went on the cortisone and anti-inflammatories, sometimes it was 15 bowel movements a day. The first day at our retreat was juices. So every 2 hours we serve fresh vegetable and fruit juices. Most of our juices are about 80% carrot, 10% celery, 10% apple. So just juices. And one might think, isn't that going to make his bowel movements even more liquid? Well, I believe that his gastrointestinal tract needed a break. In fact, he had testified to me that he had a big flare-up when he was 30. He was hospitalised. He was on no food for a whole week, and he was fed basically by an IV. And I do know that that's what they will do sometimes, just to give this gut a rest. So the juices was giving his gut a rest. So he came to us on Sunday. He had a vegetable meal with us lunch Sunday. His first dose of the gut repair was Sunday night. Monday morning, I went to see him. I said, how was your night? It's not unusual for him to go 4 or 5 times a night. He said, quite good. He said, I only went 3 times last night. He said, for me, that's quite good. I talked to him at the end of Monday. I said, how are things going? He said, well, my cramping has stopped. He said, I have this terrible cramping every day. And he said, I've actually gone 6 times today instead of 8 times. So he said, I'm pretty happy. Tuesday, I said, how was your night? He said, I only got up twice last night. He had a big smile on his face. Tuesday afternoon, how was your day? He said, I've only gone 5 times today. He said, that's quite remarkable. And he said, the stools are starting to have a little bit of form. And he said, my bleeding has stopped. So Wednesday, so that was 2 days on juices. Wednesday, food begins. So I suggested that he have no raw food, that while his gut is repairing, he have cooked food. Cooked food is softer on the gut. And probably the easiest would be vegetables. I said, we'll just hold off with the fruit for now. And we're also going to hold off with a lot of the grain, maybe a little bit of rice, ideally white rice. Remember, we're dealing with a very compromised raw gut there. So we had mostly vegetables. We'd soaked, rinsed very well, some legumes and put a little bit of that in. I'm watching to see how his body responds. What was quite remarkable, by Friday, he was having 4 bowel movements in that 24-hour period. And they all had a little bit of form, which was remarkable, considering he just had liquid. The bleeding had stopped and he had no cramping. He had a smile on his face so big. He was carrying around a jar. I said, what's the jar? He said, gut repair. He said, this is my gold. He was very, very excited. Do you remember what I said? The cells that line the gastrointestinal tract, they're remade every 3 to 5 days. So when given the right condition, the gut can respond quite quickly. In fact, it responds very quickly. Now, Tom's not healed. He's not healed yet at this point. So Friday, when we heard that the stools had a bit more form, no bleeding, no cramping, I said to him, how do you feel about stopping your anti-inflammatories? He was going to be here for another week. He said, I'm interested. Can you see when we start to consider this? We consider it when we watch that the body is responding. He stopped his anti-inflammatories and it made no difference. He still went on Saturday and Sunday 4 times a day. Now, if he had gone back to going 8 times a day, would he go back on the anti-inflammatories? Well, he's got a choice. Because his body hasn't had it for 24 hours, he could go back on half dose. But there is another option, which is the option I would advise. I said, I have no authority over your medication, only you and your doctor have. I can tell you what I would do. But if he'd started 8 times a day, I would have just started to take the gut repair, remember the slippery on golden seal and myrrh, take it every 2 hours. And what I have found is that will slow it down. Can you see I'm also teaching him? The only hope of better things is the education of people in the right principles. And the best education is experimental education, meaning you hear it, it makes sense, you try it, and your body will say, this is good. It will say, no, it is not good. If it says it is not good, it might need a little bit more herbs. It might need a little bit more time. So you always take that into the equation. Monday's looking good. I said to Tom, how do you feel about going from 20 milligrams of cortisone, prednisone, down to 15? He said, I'm interested. He did. No reaction at all. If he'd stopped, I'm sure there would have been a reaction. He has to come off this slowly. When Tom went home after being with us for 2 weeks, he was going 3 times a day to the bathroom. His stools had form, still a little softer than most, but it's got form. He had no nausea. He had no cramping in his gut. He had no bleeding from his bowel. My suggestion to Tom was to keep listening to his body. I said, don't step sideways with what you have been eating. Don't do that yet. Stick to what you're doing because it's working. And the Bible says in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. I gave him that verse. I said, hold fast to that which is good. It's working, do it. I said, you won't be eating like this forever, but just until you heal. When you know you're healed, he will know he's healed when he's eventually off all the cortisone, all the prednisone. And he can start eating other foods, and if everything is happy, then little by little he can introduce other foods. If he introduces other foods too quickly and he gets a reaction, maybe diarrhea, stop immediately. Go back onto the gut repair every 2 hours until it settles right down, and then we start again. Remember, nature's process of healing and upbuilding is gradual. It's gradual, and to the impatient it seems slow. Really, he has had this problem, I would like to suggest, for 40 years. It was first shown with his reaction to the formula as a baby. It took a while to develop because we live in an amazing body that endures so much, for so long. But little by little, he stuck to the program. No one could talk him out of that. And if his mate was in front of him with a plate full of donuts, he just threw his head back and laughed, because he looked at that donut and you know what he thought to himself? There's the cramping again, there's the bleeding, there's the diarrhea. No thanks. No thanks. He left a very happy man. He was told that he would never heal because he had an autoimmune disease. Autoimmune diseases can manifest themselves in different ways, in many different people. And that's why you're the doctor, because your body will tell you. Your body lets you know if it's not working.